So this is the time period is 22 years ago, 23, so maybe 2003, and Jane, Tessa, and my sister and I go to Inner Mongolia, and I had this idea that we could traverse the Gobi Desert to go into China over the Great Wall. But the Gobi Desert is the second greatest desert in the world. We had absolutely no equipment with us whatsoever. Maybe we had sleeping bags, but I'm not even sure if we had that. Probably we had some sleeping bags, but that's it. We didn't have tents, we didn't have netting, we didn't have mats or anything. And we had no equipment, and we didn't have anything really to do this journey, which would have required a lot of equipment. In fact, we probably would have had to have had pack animals to undertake this journey safely. We had none of that, and we actually barely had any food. We just bought some green beans at some market we went through, and I think that's pretty much all we had. So with a bunch of green beans and virtually no water, we entered the Gobi Desert. There was no tracks or trails or even direction, because I didn't even have a compass or anything, and we just started walking. In retrospect, it seems like such an interesting thing to do. And so we just started walking into the ocean of sand dunes. And so the Gobi Desert is that classic kind of Sahara kind of desert, where it's just an endless sea of sand dunes that you can fall asleep in your jet airliner, and at 900 k's an hour you can go to sleep for a few hours and wake up and the sand dunes are still there. So these are just like really expensive deserts that you can't just walk into and hope that you're gonna walk across it with no equipment and anything. But anyway, so we set upon doing that, and Jane, Tessa, and my sister, we went in. I should say that they, I guess, followed me, because the foolishness was entirely on me for having this idea of crossing the Gobi Desert on foot with nothing. And so the Gobi Desert is one of the driest places on Earth. It virtually doesn't rain there at all. That's why there's not even in the Australian deserts, there's always vegetation, because there's just enough moisture somewhere. In the Sahara Desert, there's still occasional vegetation, but in the Gobi Desert where we were, there was no vegetation. There's just not enough rain even to sustain the most arid plants that are drought resistant. And so walking through there, and after a few days, I realized that since we haven't had any water and food for that time, that I realized we were going to die there. And the last drink any of us had was that within the first day we met this person with a camel, and he offered us, so he was just walking across the desert with his camel, and he saw us and felt sorry for us, so he offered us because they don't see tourists there. white people. And so he offered us some soured camel's milk, which I felt I didn't want to risk having, even though the alternative was just having nothing at all. But Jane had some, and she was fine. So she had that. That was our last little caloric intake that we had. We didn't eat for another day before that. Yeah, and so then we're there, and the walking was extremely difficult because this desert is so dry that the sand dunes, because they haven't had any rain to compact the sand, they're such loose sand that literally it takes you like 3 steps to do 1 step worth of movement. And so you're walking, and then you're walking up and down all the time, up and down these sand dunes. And yeah, and I saw that the futility of any attempts to do anything else other than do something that was also futile, but it seemed like it had somewhat of a chance of succeeding, is that I suggested to the girls that we start digging for water, which I knew would be a good like 300 meters down, but I figured it was, it was just the only thing I could conceive of that had any chance of us surviving, was that we would dig and dig until we'd hopefully hit some underground stream, and then so we found the kind of lowest valley of these sand dunes, and we dug and dug and dug, and then, as happens when you die of dehydration, is that we all passed out whilst we're digging this hole. So we're digging until we just passed out. Not went to sleep. We actually just passed out, as in like so you've got just the strong sun. You haven't eaten for days. You haven't drunk for days, and you just kind of pass out. And that's then the first sequence of how you perish there, is that you die there then. And so we passed out like that. And now, just to contextualize this next bit, if you have really dry sand and you dig a hole, and then even if you take a whole bucket of water, like that 10-20 liters of water, and you pour it in, it just seeps right in. It just goes zoop, and it disappears because the sand is not water permeable. And so we woke up we passed out in the blue sky with the sun blaring at us, and we came to in a torrential rain, which is so impossibly unusual in that area. And it was in fact such torrential rain, like a kind of a tropical torrential rain, that it rained sufficiently that this little hole that we dug filled up with water. So it rained so much that it was enough to fill this hole that we had dug full of water. So when we came to, we drank our fill from the hole, and we took every single thing that we could make into some kind of reservoir of water. We filled our hats and our just everything, boots and everything, whatever we could. We filled it up. I think we had one pot with us and bowl or something that we so we had this water then with us. And what happened was that whilst I was passed out, I had this dream, or this vision of this girl, this little girl, and I saw her in all the details of having little freckles and blonde hair and blue eyes, and I saw that, and her name in that dream, and in my sort of planning of what her name would be, was Mei Li, right, which means beautiful in Chinese. And so I saw that, and then when I came to, I said to Jane, which is the person with whom I would have a child, that we would have a daughter, and she would be looking the way I described her, and she would, her name would be May. And I know, of course, like, it sort of seems like, all right, so there's two blue-eyed, blonde people that have a child. Of course it's going to be blonde hair and blue-eyed, and like that's, you know, not so unlikely. But at that time, I didn't plan to have a child. I had no wish or idea to have a child. And so that was, and then, yeah, we had enough water even to boil up some of the green beans that we had. And then we just kept on walking till we eventually found this track thing. And then we came across the Great Wall of China, which in those sections that aren't tourist sections, the Great Wall of China is just this bump in the ground. It's nothing like what you see in those, I mean, that's what it's like in those tourist places, which I've never been to, but in reality, most of the Great Wall of China is just this, like a lump, like this continuous kind of a, lumps in the ground. And so we climbed over that, and we entered China, and there we were able to contact the nearest outskirts of villages, and they gave us food and water and everything. And yeah, and so that's the adventure of the Gobi Desert that we did.